thought today we will probably discuss something which affects all the functions. This is the business performance analytics.
How far you see organizations have come through in these areas, and how much on the ground organizations are really able to leverage both predictive and prescriptive analytics.
So, what we have to do is measure those KPIs and then find out the trends of that, in the sense how they have been showing up in the last month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, and those kind of things, whether they're improving or they're going down.
Where can organizations start, those who are actually laggards, they have not started yet and still thinking about it? What are those one or two, three things that they need to do to get started?
From the simple, descriptive analytics of what went well or not so well in the past month, past week, and all, to giving them predictions in terms of the GMV, sales and all.
Welcome back to AI Connect, where we discuss AI, data, and analytics, and together or individually how they are creating business impact. Recently, we started a new series which is focused at functional and domain analytics. And in that series, the first episode that we have done, which was focused at tax and compliance analytics. Now, some of you may be thinking, where is the role of data and analytics in tax and compliance? If you're not sure about that, I would highly recommend go and watch that episode, and I'll put the link of that episode in the show note. But today, again, going back to the tax and compliance analytics, it is important for some of you who may be not aware to know that we basically discussed what is the impact of tax and compliance analytics on the business, and what are the different criteria that businesses look at while applying analytics in tax and compliance. To begin with, what problem it solves and for which stakeholder, and what are the different use cases. We started off with tax and compliance, where Shiva discussed the role of AI and analytics in making the tax and compliance more efficient and effective, how technology is solving complex tax and compliance related problems, and what kind of tax and compliance related complexities are involved in e-commerce domain. We also spoke about what kind of work Prescience is doing within this domain. Now, we will move on to another functional domain today. And to discuss that, I have Anirban Majumdar, who is the CEO of Prescience. So, Anirban, welcome to AI Connect.
Hey, thanks, Jaydeep.
So, what are we discussing today? Which functional domain we are discussing?
I thought today we will probably discuss something which affects all the functions. This is the business performance analytics. It basically looks at how the overall business is performing and how does that affect the various functions in a company.
Wonderful. So let's begin with who are the key stakeholders of business performance analytics.
So this part is actually useful for all the CXOs and the CEO in the company. It's also useful for the board. What we have seen mostly is that it is driven by the CFO organization, which is trying to make sense of the numbers that are coming out from the various internal systems to make sense of how they're performing, whether they are going to meet the numbers, the various KPIs, whether they're doing better or doing worse, which parts of the business is doing good, which parts could do better. So to make sense of all of that and to get a clear picture and a clear insight, they look forward to this business performance analytics.
Understood. And can you share at a high level what are the use cases?
Yeah, so in this case, what we look at is the KPIs of the company are all defined, right? So which are the key things to be measured and what KPIs at the overall level, at the CEO level, the CFO level, and then the other CXOs. So what we have to do is measure those KPIs and then find out the trends of that, in the sense how they have been showing up in the last month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, and those kind of things, whether they're improving or they are going down, and those kind of things present a picture of that. So the KPIs have to be defined in advance, and then we see that what kind of data we have to measure those KPIs and then bring out the results and insights.
Got it. For a longest period, a lot of these decisions are either managed, tracked, managed haphazardly, and then assessed, and then decisions made completely gut driven, right?
Yeah.
So, what it takes for a lot of organizations who are even today not using, let's say, analytics as an area, how are they making this decision? What does it take for those organizations to move away from gut-driven decision making to data-driven performance management kind of style?
If you see what has happened and what keeps happening in organizations is, in spite of so many different systems and processes, you have ERPs and CRMs and CDP platforms and supply chain software and so many things, HRMS and all. But in the end, a lot of times they end up putting some data in Excel files and then doing that. And then multiple things happen. One is that sometimes there is inconsistency in data. So it's basically saying, hey, Jaydeep, your data is not right, my data is right. And those kind of things happen. So data doesn't come in a timely manner. So you may be looking at last month's data, I may be looking at last week's data. Multiple things can happen and do happen, which leads to business executives, the senior executives to look at data, but they're not very confident in terms of the accuracy of the data, the timeliness of the data in those Excel files. So they look at that, but then they end up making decisions and or some kind of a very guesstimate based decision, right? So when you move from that to a database thing where the data from various sources are being captured in a data warehouse or a data lake, you are doing data cleansing, you are ensuring the right ETL processes, and then automating the whole thing to get timely reports and dashboards. So that helps them, the executives, to have the confidence in the data, and then from there they can start looking for general pictures of how the business is doing, how the environment is shaping up, how the competition is doing, and based on that, then they can take decisions in various aspects.
Got it. So, in terms of deciding, you mentioned that to decide or start tracking, you need to have the right KPIs.
Correct.
So, let's say at the beginning, when you are working on or deciding on the right KPI, what are the common pitfalls to avoid?
So in the sense, so you have to very clear. So one is at the that period level, you have decided that you have these targets. So your KPI should come out of those main targets, two or three things, whether in terms of growth, whether in terms of customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction or various other things, right? Or maybe sometimes you take up some very key things which are affecting the business. Say you may say that I want to reduce my inventory cost by X percentage in this quarter or in the next 2 quarters, kind of thing. So from that, you look at what are the various KPIs to measure. If it's inventory, then are we looking at the lead time? Are you looking at fulfillment and those kind of things? If it is sales growth, then you see, okay, which all areas are doing well and how we can strengthen them, which all areas are not doing well. So what are the KPIs in terms of simple revenues to availability of stock to demand to how the the competition is doing and things like that.
Again, when we talk about KPIs, different teams and functions may have different set of KPIs,
Right.
and that can make things either complicated or make them completely siloed, right? What are the meaningful ways or best practices to help organizations avoid that part and ensure that when you are deciding what KPIs to be measured, they are integrated, but at the same time don't become overly complex?
Yeah, that's a very good point and a good question, Jaideep. So yeah, what happens is like especially for large complex organizations, that whole process of deciding, let's say and planning in terms of what we'll do, what will not do in the let's say next financial year, that takes a lot of time. Then they come, then they divide it in the okay, this is how we want to do it, and then maybe divide into quarters and things like that. So then those are trickle down to the various functions. So for example, if I'm saying that I will do $100 of sales next year, and these are my quarterly split, so that number, when it goes to the factories, they will say, okay, then this is how I have to manufacture. Then the supply chain knows, okay, this much I have to transmit from the factory to different warehouses or customers. So those plans take place, but those are like based on some very old past data. But as things are very dynamic, so when you're measuring the KPIs, it should enable these decision makers to quickly start changing things. Like, so the factory should know, okay, let me reduce the production of item one, but increase for item two because market seems to be buying more of item two and hardly anything of item one. Supply chain may look at saying, okay, let me change the way I am supplying my warehouses based on the availability of the stocks. So that those KPIs, if you are able to continuously refresh and give them the right data and on a very quick frequency, it helps them to reduce some of these disadvantages.
Okay, okay. In terms of, so there is a lot of buzz on predictive analytics and then prescriptive analytics as well. In your opinion, how far you see organizations,
Yeah.
how far you see organizations have come through in these areas, and how much on the ground organizations are really able to leverage both predictive and prescriptive analytics, and what is required to go beyond the descriptive part.
Correct. Yeah, so I mean, initial days or even now in many places, the analytics are restricted to descriptive and to some cases diagnostic, saying, okay, if we are landed here, what were the causes for this? Whether it's good or bad, for both cases, you want to find out what you did well or what you did not do well. So moving from that, we are now moving to predictive. Here, what has happened is because of the explosion in terms of the amount of data you can store and also the types of data you can store is not just the structured data from your own IT systems. You are also taking in different things like, say, customer call records or weather data for your supply chain, and you are also looking at competition data, market data. So based on that, so you can take up multiple different factors and do the analysis, right? Instead of having only your own set of 2, 3 data points. So that makes it that much better output from your predictive models. And similarly, using the AI ML and churning through this data, you can look at generating recommendations, right? So you can say, okay, for this kind of stores, let's say for a CPG, FMCG kind of company which is selling different food products. So for this kind of stores, you should push more of this size of packets, goods. Let's say you're saying smaller sizes. For the larger supermarkets, you should move more of larger sizes, or what kind of thing, or which brands or which variants of the brand could go to this region and which variant should go to other region. So a lot of these decisions and predictions are now being generated, which is helping the decision makers to move things faster.
Okay. And in real life, do you see organizations have come through a long way now doing
Yeah.
this part, like whether it's CPG companies or any other, even manufacturing maybe?
Yeah, a lot of companies have been, all the big companies, right from the Walmarts or Unilevers or P&Gs of the world are doing it. And a lot of our own customers, we see they use data extensively, whether in e-commerce space or manufacturing space or travel space. So they and their business performance analytics teams, they do excellent work and provide them the insights in a very timely manner.
Understood.
So if you look at the work we're doing for a very large e-commerce company, there again the business performance teams, right from the simple descriptive analytics of what went well or not so well in the past month, past week, and all, to giving them predictions in terms of the GMV sales and all, or they move to even saying what kind of sellers will do well, what kind of buyers should be targeted. So they're providing those predictions, recommendations to the thing. So that whole business performance meeting The way it is structured now has shifted a lot because people, the senior executives, get very salient insights, and if they want to deep dive, then they can go deep into the numbers. So instead of just looking at a dashboard or an Excel file full of numbers and then trying to figure out which numbers they should focus on.
Yeah. Are there any dependencies to make some of these, especially business performance analytics programs, successful?
So the key thing, first thing is that you should have the data clean, the good quality data in a timely manner, and from a single source of truth. So that is the basic thing, and it should be available on
So
time.
focus on sort of streamlining your capturing sides of things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
From where the data are captured. Yeah.
Secondly, the business performance analytics team should also be clear like what are the core KPIs, because if you put a dashboard with 20 odd columns and hundreds of rows, it makes it difficult for people to figure out, okay, what am I looking at.
Right.
So one is the storytelling part of it, giving the key insights, and secondly, focusing only on the key factors that they want the user want to see. Exactly.
That is moving the needle.
Exactly. So what they want to see, and then if people want to move, so it should have the option to show the other data also. So instead of showing too much stuff, the thing is now it's a lean thing. So just show what is very important and move on from there.
Okay. So, Anirban, before we leave, last question. Where can organizations start, those who are actually laggards, maybe are not started yet and still thinking about it? What are those one or two, three things that they need to do to get started? Should they start with a specific function, or should they implement across all functions at one shot? Assuming that someone like a CFO would actually like to see a view of across department, because at the end of the day, largely they are financially related, both in terms of investment and yield, right?
Correct, correct. Yeah, absolutely. So it has to start from the CFO and his organization. And see, the basic thing is you have to see how much you're earning and how much you're spending and how much profits you're making, and are you, as per the goals you've set for yourself, you are going ahead or falling behind. So if you look at this core theme and then look at the key KPIs and first focus on building that overall scorecard for the business, look at the performance, and then start adding more reports or features to do that.
All right, so I think this probably is a good place where we can wrap up. And I think, in summary, what we just discussed is business performance analytics is becoming critical board for the CXOs. All have a clear sight of performances across functions as well as the company as a whole. Understanding what kind of investment is required, understanding where the demand and supply equation is, and understanding what kind of adjustments and decisions to be made to tap into the growth curve. So business performance analytics largely helps the CFO office, enabling the other CXOs, maybe CEO and the board, with the right type of information that they need to see in terms of the KPIs that are decided, and also predict in future based on the historical data how the organizations are going to grow better by leveraging and tweaking certain areas. All right, so it has been a pleasure again talking to you, Anirban, and discussing this very critical functional domain analytics area. For the viewers, we'll continue to dabble into other functional domains in the coming episodes. For today, we'll wrap up here. Do take a look at the first episode if you have missed out, which is tax and compliance, and share your feedback if you have any, and we'll be happy to respond to all of them. With that, thank you very much. Please join us back again, and it's a wrap.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, everyone.